senior Israeli officials have told U.S. diplomats that if Iranian protesters take to the streets at this point, they're going to get slaughtered by Iran's government. And of course, this is, as we're seeing this public call for protesters to take to the streets and overthrow the regime. So what can we make of this, Dan?
I think we can make that there is still a lot of confusion. Some people suggest that the Iranian people should take to the streets. Others, including Reza Pahlavi, have said don't do it quite yet.
Right.
There clearly will come a point where the regime's protest suppression mechanism might be sufficiently weakened, where it will feel less irresponsible to make that call. As for the killing of Larijani, there's a great man or woman theory of politics and even business that some people are irreplaceable, but they're extremely, extremely rare. Even Steve Jobs turns out to have been replaceable. At Apple, maybe Hitler wasn't replaceable, but Sinwar, Hamas survived him, Hezbollah survived the elimination of Nasrallah. I'm skeptical whether Larijani's ouster will really eliminate Iran's possibility to create a charismatic radical to lead whatever parts of their system. However, it's rather clear that even though the Israeli government has not been very clear in the goals of the operation of the war, regime change is one of them. It's not totally pie in the sky. Israel and the U.S. appear to be actually aiming for that. For this to happen, the ability and inclination of the Iranian regime to mow down the protesters in the streets has to be weakened, both in the desire to do it and the ability to do it. That is the attack on the besieged. The attack on Larijani, I think, is a message to the leadership that will replace him, and in particular, the military leadership. The most probable way this is going to work is if people take to the streets, are not massacred by the tens of thousands, and the Iranian military, which is by now implicated, certainly, in the system, and its heads were appointed by the Revolutionary Guard, all that is true, but they were historically not part of the theocracy.
Right.
They preceded it. The military has to feel like the Rubicon's been crossed, and there is a sense that the regime is ready to surrender to a coup. Not declare a surrender, but will not fight back too much if the military operates.
Right.
And that, I think that is actually the messaging that is evident here in the fairly determined gradual decapitation.
I'm interested to turn to you, Dan, and hear what your take is on whether or not there are going to be any other Western parties that get involved in this, and why we're seeing so much reluctancy on the part of Western allies to the United States in at least securing the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, a number of reasons. First of all, the Europeans in particular have projected weakness across the decades, so no one's surprised by their disinterest in taking part in the war. But beyond that kind of fairly popular in many circles cynicism about the Europeans, look, you call them America's allies, but Trump has been disdaining America's allies for, all of his first term in the past year or so in office. He's been upsetting the Europeans terribly and projecting indifference towards, and even a disrespect towards the very idea of NATO, at various times calling it obsolete. He, in his national security strategy that came out just in December, was quite disdainful of the Europeans, indifferent to alliances with democracies, walked away completely from promoting democracy. This idea that they are allies not only based on interests but shared values, Trump is basically thrown out the window. And he completely freaked them out by seeming to not rule out force to take over Greenland, which belongs to Denmark, which is a NATO ally.
Right.
So, I mean, he's so upset them that it's a little bit tragicomic to see him going to them hat in hand and expecting any favors. They probably rather are happy to see him twisting in the wind. On top of which, Trump never consulted with NATO or his allies, or famously even Congress, before he started the war. So he's in a terrible political position. He's incredibly unpopular, which a lot of people in Israel don't quite appreciate. And we are seeing the results of that now. Now, should they help free up the Strait of Hormuz? Obviously. The fact that Iran can even do this underscores how desperately essential it is for the regime to be overthrown. But I'm not expecting the Europeans to jump on that bandwagon. Maybe, just maybe, Keir Starmer in the UK might be someone.
Yeah. Do you think there's any path forward to perhaps more Abraham Accord deals?
Well, with Saudi Arabia, that depends on the Palestinians in all likelihood, unfortunately, because that's a big hurdle to cross. I tend to discount what a lot of Arab leaders say in public. I think in private, they're probably quite happy at the prospect that the Iranian regime might fall. And therefore, the answer to your question really depends on what the outcome of the war is. And there always were three possible outcomes. One, the fall of the regime. The entire world, practically, with the possible exception of Russia and China, not even would celebrate. The other is a regime sufficiently terrified and cowed agrees to surrender terms, no more militias, missiles, and nukes. And the third is that Trump eventually walks away because he loses patience. And the regime might have been weakened, but they live to fight another day, and maybe then there will be some other reason to go to war in another 8 months. And that would be terrible because the regime would declare victory. Now, every day brings new assessments as to which of these three options is most likely. If option 1 and 2 happen, the Gulfies will be quite pleased. And Israel will have done an amazing thing and have achieved one of the great outcomes of the past 50 years. And that kind of strength draws allies to you. If the third thing happens, which is that this entire mess was created and all this agitation in global markets and disruption in oil markets for basically very little except the killing of a bunch of evildoers in Iran, then the Gulfies are going to maybe reassess whether the American and Israeli alliance is what can provide them with protection. And they might start again to try to hedge their bets and maybe get closer to the regime in Iran. A lot is at stake here.